Thank you all for checking out Crime Culture. Today, I'm going to tell you 3 progressively more disturbing stories, all of which are about men who fooled the world and almost got away with it. Have you ever woken up wishing you could be someone else? Maybe someone with a bigger house, a better paying job, a better physique, or celebrity status? Well, the 3 men in today's story did more than just wish. They acted on these desires, putting on a mask to conceal their true identity and become someone they weren't. And these 3 attempts to fool the world were somewhat successful, though the schemes of today's individuals wouldn't last forever. One was a suburban father who slipped into the spotlight of professional sports. Another, a smooth-talking criminal who convinced the world he had the authority to sell the Eiffel Tower twice. And the third, and possibly the darkest and most disturbing, a German immigrant who clawed his way into America's elite by pretending to be a Rockefeller. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the morbid and mysterious, go ahead and fist bump that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on all post notifications. It truly helps my channel grow and allows me to keep bringing you haunting stories just like the one I am promising you today. All right, turn down the lights, settle in, and prepare yourself as we dive into today's story. The year is 1979. 32-year-old Barry Bremen is preparing for one of the biggest games of his life, the NBA All-Star Game. The Silver Dome in Michigan is electric. Fans on their feet, stars lined up across the court. Barry, in his Kansas City Kings uniform, finishes stretching courtside and jogs onto the hardwood court to begin warm-ups. He runs layup drills beside Julius Erving. He takes jump shots with Otis Birdsong. Cameras flash, the crowd cheers. Barry continues running drills and socializing with players in preparation for his first All-Star appearance, though Barry has a secret. There is one thing different about Barry Bremen than the rest of the players at the All-Star Game this year, though the crowd and most players are completely unaware. Barry isn't on the roster for this All-Star Game. In fact, Barry isn't on any roster in the NBA because Barry Bremen isn't a professional basketball player. He's a 32-year-old insurance salesman from the Detroit suburbs. So how did he end up warming up next to some of the best players to ever step foot on the court? To most onlookers, Barry had a very ordinary but successful life. At home, Barry was a husband to his wife Margot and a father to 3 children. He held a stable job as an insurance salesman, and though he wasn't wealthy, he was comfortable. And yet for Barry, comfort wasn't enough. He wanted to be something more. He wanted to be known and acknowledged. Standing at 6'4", he could pass as an athlete in just about any sport. His friends always used to tease him, "Barry, you're tall enough. You could blend in with the pros." And that statement was enough to plant the seed that would grow into this life of lies. The life of Barry Bremen, NBA and MLB All-Star, NFL cheerleader and referee, professional golfer, and ultimately insurance salesman. Though Barry's schemes would go on for close to a decade, it all started that one night in February 1979 at the NBA All-Star Game. After making a bet with his friends that he could fit in with the pros, Barry arrived at the game in his everyday street clothes, his Kansas City Kings jersey concealed underneath. At halftime, he would slip away to the restroom, removing what he wore to the game and revealing his new identity, an NBA All-Star. Now, in the proper attire, he slipped past security and down to the court, his heart pounding as he stepped onto the court. For those few minutes, Barry belonged. He felt the pride and exhilaration he had been longing for his entire adult life. He finally made it. Of course, until security noticed, then he was escorted off. This experience gave Barry the sense of belonging and stardom that he had been longing for. It was like a drug, and he couldn't get enough. He was hooked. Over the next decade, Barry would actually carve out his own piece of stardom, not because of his athletic prowess, but for his stunts that often ended in fines and humiliation. He made several appearances for various teams from 1979 to 1986, some of which he was actually able to pull off for a considerable amount of time before a staff member or coach realized he didn't belong and had him escorted out. Barry considered his experience at the 1979 NBA All-Star Game a success. He pulled it off long enough to get on the court, acknowledge fans, and practice with the players. This result led him to see just how far he could get. He would try his hand again at the MLB All-Star Game that same year. Wearing his custom-fitted New York Yankees jersey, Barry would drive to the Seattle Kingdome, step out of his car, and work his way past security and onto the field. He would congregate with players, take team pictures, and even shag fly balls for 30 minutes before anyone noticed. Once spotted, he was ushered off the field, where he would hide out in the Mariners clubhouse until spotted by a trainer and removed from the stadium. Fueled by the recognition he received while on the field, Barry continued these stunts, dancing on the sidelines as a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader before being escorted out by security, posing to be a professional golfer, and playing practice rounds at the 1979 and 1980 U.S. Open, posing as a referee in Super Bowl 15. These appearances would continue up until 1986, when after another MLB All-Star Game appearance, he was spotted in the outfield catching pop flies before the game and was arrested. He claimed his treatment after his arrest was so poor that he swore this would be his last stunt. And it was. Over a span of almost a decade, Barry racked up thousands of dollars in fines, was hit with lawsuits, banned from attending games at certain venues, and was even arrested. But his antics were remembered by athletes, fans, and announcers alike, earning him the nickname the Great Imposter. Paris, 1925. The Eiffel Tower looms over the city. Rust spreads across its beams as it's becoming more difficult and expensive to maintain. Newspapers speculate whether the monument might one day be demolished. In the luxurious halls of the Hôtel de Crillon, a group of scrap metal dealers gather. They've been invited to a confidential government meeting about the tower's future. At the head of the table sits a man in a crisp suit, exuding authority. His name is Victor Lustig, and tonight he will attempt the unthinkable. Born in Austria-Hungary in 1890, Lustig grew up restless and brilliant with a knack for making money by any means. In his early teenage years, Lustig began to sharpen his skills as a con man and thief. He began his reign of crime as a measly pickpocket, but would quickly turn to more lucrative forms of making a quick buck. By 18, Lustig was notorious for draining the pockets of participants at the poker table. By his 20s, he had become a skilled con man, fluent in multiple languages, smooth in manner, and fearless in ambition. Early in his career of crime, Victor Lustig was known to frequent transatlantic trips aboard ocean liners. Here, he would swindle money from unsuspecting victims at the poker table and was getting pretty good at it until World War I broke out and ocean cruises were brought to a halt. This forced Lustig to change his strategy, pack his bags, and head to the United States. Once in the US, he expanded his repertoire of crime and began conducting shady real estate deals. These small cons were not what he was after, though. He knew he could pull off something larger, much larger. While still in the US, Lustig would sit down and read the newspaper. In it, he noticed talks about the deteriorating Eiffel Tower, and he formulated a plan, knowing this would be his biggest con to date. After conducting a handful of cons in the US, Victor was quickly becoming a household name to law enforcement. So, between the increasing pressure from police and this new opportunity in Paris, he once again decided to pack his bags and head overseas to the City of Love. With forged government documents, Lustig convinced those around him that he was a government official with a lot of authority. He made his way to the Hôtel de Crillon, walked up to the front desk, and requested a room. It is from this room that he would put his plan into action. Posing as a government official, Lustig would begin to write executives at the top metal scrapping companies in France, outlining the French government's plan to have the Eiffel Tower demolished. Eager to close such a large deal, these executives were quick to respond and ultimately pay a visit to Lustig at the hotel to discuss the details of this project. Once executives arrived at this grand hotel, they would make their way to the meeting room, which in reality was just a dingy storage room in the basement of the hotel that Lustig paid the staff to transform into a meeting room to conduct official government business. During this meeting, Lustig began to propose his plan, going on to tell the executives that due to the deteriorating condition of the Eiffel Tower, costly repairs, and confidential political issues, the French government has decided to demolish it. He goes on to say the tower will be sold to the highest bidder, and unsurprisingly, the bids flooded in. Shortly after these meetings were held, Lustig would strike a deal. A company agreed to pay 1.2 million francs for the tower, and the check was cut, making Lustig a millionaire overnight, adding to his already substantial amount of wealth. Then, he disappeared. And after the executive realized he'd been duped, he was too embarrassed to go to the police to report this crime. This led to Lustig returning to Paris a month later and successfully replicating the scheme for a second time. This time, though, he would be reported to authorities, leading him to flee back to the United States. It was here that he would run his most lucrative and successful con of his career. Working with a cabinet maker in New York City, Lustig would develop a box, one that he claimed was the world's only money-duplicating machine. He would present this box to potential buyers and show them how it operated. He would insert a $1,000 bill in one end, then 6 hours later, a second $1,000 bill would be spit out, doubling their investment in a matter of hours. People were astonished and would spend large sums of money for this magic box, only to find out in Lustig's demonstration he had a hidden $1,000 bill inside that would come out the other side, appearing that his original bill was duplicated. It was this final scheme that would draw attention from authorities and finally put him behind bars, where he would stay until his death in 1947. His name is Christian Gerhardsreiter. He was born in a small town in Bavaria in 1961. He is quiet but intelligent. Behind his eyes burns an obsession to leave behind his humble beginnings and become someone extraordinary. As a teenager, Christian dreamed of America. He saw it as a place where reinvention was possible. And in 1978, he arrived in the United States as a foreign exchange student and would immediately begin fabricating lies to create the life he truly wanted. Christian would introduce himself as Christopher C. Crowe, a successful Hollywood actor and television producer, or Christopher Mountbatten, the world-renowned physician. The lies would start to grow and expand, each time becoming more addicted to the respect he received when people realized he was someone. By the 1980s, he reinvented himself as Christopher Chichester, claiming aristocratic British roots. He lived in upscale California neighborhoods, mingling with the wealthy. But soon, neighbors began to grow suspicious. He moved constantly, leaving behind unpaid bills and rumors, leading him to once again change his identity. This time, he would choose the identity of a member of one of America's wealthiest families. Christian transformed himself into Clark Rockefeller. The Rockefeller name started with John D. Rockefeller in 1870 when he founded the Standard Oil Company. He would grow this company to an almost incomprehensible size, making the family and Rockefeller name one that is worth hundreds of billions of dollars, a name that carries a lot of power and status, just what Christian is looking for. With charm and a fabricated backstory, he infiltrates Boston's high society. He wore designer suits, drove luxury cars, and spoke with quiet authority, introducing himself everywhere as Clark Rockefeller, a wealthy Yale graduate, successful business owner, and of course, a member of one of America's most prestigious families. In 1995, he married Sandra Boss, a successful businesswoman and Harvard graduate. Together, they raised a daughter. To Sandra, Clark was eccentric but brilliant, the heir to a fortune, a man of mystery, but beneath the facade lay a dangerous truth that goes far beyond pretending to be someone he isn't. Christian controlled Sandra with manipulation and lies. He forbade her from contacting his family, claiming secrecy was necessary for security. When she pushed for answers, he grew evasive and angry. Though Sandra was earning all the money for their household, Christian handled the finances to ensure his ruse wasn't discovered. By the summer of 2008, their marriage collapsed, leading to bitter custody battles and Sandra finding out who she'd really been married to. Shortly after their divorce was finalized in 2008, during a supervised visit with his daughter, Christian snapped. He attacked the social worker overseeing the meeting, shoved her aside, and fled with his daughter. The nation watched in shock. An international manhunt began. 6 days later, police found him hiding in Baltimore, living under yet another false name. His daughter was safe, but Christian's lies started to fall apart. His name and picture was plastered all over the news and internet, a picture that his previous neighbors in California would see and realize they'd been duped. That's when things started to take a dark turn, and people began to realize Christian's web of lies was much more extensive than everyone originally had thought. In the 1980s, when Christian was living in California as a British aristocrat under the name Christopher Chichester, a man named John Sohus and his wife Linda vanished from the California neighborhood where Christian rented a guest house. Years later, John's remains were discovered, buried in the backyard of this guest house. With his remains were found bags from 2 university bookstores, both of which were universities that Christian attended, along with blood evidence in his guest house he was renting at the time. After seeing Christian's picture and true identity, the neighbors began to connect him to the man that had lived in the guest house when John disappeared and contacted police. Though Christian denied involvement, this overwhelming evidence tied him to the crime. In 2013, he was convicted of John's murder and sentenced to 27 years to life in prison. Unfortunately, Linda's body has never been found. For decades, Christian Gerhardsreiter lived as a man he was not. He fooled high society, destroyed a family, and left behind death and devastation. He wasn't just a pretender, he was a predator, weaponizing lies to manipulate and control. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to comment your thoughts on these twisted cases of manipulation. And if you're a fan of the morbid and mysterious, be sure to subscribe to Crime Culture, where I will be posting a new haunting true story every week. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on all post notifications. Until next week, stay safe and stay curious.